Endgame, the most underrated phase in the game of chess. While many chess enthusiasts are captivated by the endless complexities of opening theory and the fierce battles of the middle game, endgames often don't receive the same level of interest, especially among beginners. However, endgames have a significant impact on the final result. By the time players reach this stage, they likely have little time and energy left, and these two factors add an extra layer of excitement to the endgame. Today, we will witness one of the most interesting, accurate, and breathtaking endgames ever played. With the white pieces, we have Vishy Anand, the Indian legend, a complete chess master and a former world champion from 2007 until 2013. On the other side, we have Magnus Carlsen, the highest-rated chess player ever and a former world chess champion for 10 consecutive years, from 2013 to 2023. Carlsen is also renowned for his exceptional endgame skills and is widely considered the best endgame player of all time. When two world champions face off, you can expect the highest level of chess. So, will Vishy's vast experience overcome Magnus's incredible skills? This game took place in Dubai during a rapid team tournament, where Vishy and Magnus served as their team's captains. As usual, Magnus was late for his game, but after a bit of running, he finally passed the fair play check and managed to arrive just in time. Anand started the game by moving his pawn to e4, to which Magnus responded with e6, choosing the French defense. Although the French defense is a solid opening for black, it's not very popular among top-rated players due to its slightly passive nature. This made Magnus's choice somewhat surprising, especially considering he needed a win, given his team's situation in the tournament. The players then followed a standard opening theory, and after Magnus pushed his pawns to f5 and g4, closing the kingside, Vishy decided to play the move d takes c5. This move was an attempt to avoid a completely closed position, knowing that his two bishops would struggle in such a scenario. Magnus then developed his other knight to e7, followed by a queen trade on f2. In this position, it's clear that black has a better pawn structure. However, Magnus faces a significant disadvantage, with a passive light-squared bishop on c8. He immediately tried to activate the bishop by moving it to d7, but Anand, displaying his deep experience, played a4, effectively preventing any future attempts by the bishop to reach the a4 or b5 squares. Magnus then continued to reroute his pieces to the queen side until he placed his rook on b8. While this move might seem dubious, it blocks the other rook on a8 and doesn't appear to offer any immediate prospects with the b-file blocked by a knight and a pawn. Grandmasters often think several moves ahead. Both Magnus and Vishy knew that any chance of making progress in this position would likely occur on the queen side, which is why they positioned their pieces for a potential future breakthrough. The players then exchanged pieces on the c4 square, blocked the queen side, and shifted their focus to the only open file, the d-file. Vishy decided to double his rooks on the d-file by moving one to d4. Let's take a moment to evaluate this position. Material is equal, but black's problem with his light-squared bishop persisted and even worsened after Magnus pushed his pawns to a6 and b5, making the bishop a completely passive and miserable piece.
I'm gonna kill myself!
Wow.
I'm going to kill myself, and it's your fault!
That's an overreaction.
However, due to the limited chances for either side to make progress, this position is likely to be evaluated as equal. Recognizing this, Magnus initially decided to ignore his game and instead follow his teammates' games, hoping to see them achieving positive results, which would make a draw a satisfactory outcome for him. However, after a few moments of watching the other games, Magnus realized he would need to play for a win. He reluctantly played rook to d8, his expression clearly showing frustration at having to push for a win in such an equal position against Vishy. Magnus then exchanged rooks on d4, followed by activating his bishop to c6, while Vishy retreated his rook to d2. After some thought, Magnus played a bold move that transformed this closed endgame into a fierce battle. He sacrificed his g-pawn by pushing it to g3, aiming to play for a win. The idea behind this sacrifice was that if Vishy captured the pawn, Magnus would activate his rook to g8, putting pressure on the g2 pawn and potentially the f4 pawn in the future. Caught off guard by this unexpected sacrifice, Vishy chose to ignore it and simply moved his king to g1. At this point, the players began to play more quickly as they were running low on time. They maneuvered their pieces and made some exchanges. Both players started moving their kings closer to the center, leading to an endgame featuring a bishop and a knight. Typically, the knight would have an advantage over the bishop due to the blocked pawn structure. However, in this position, the knight's movement is restricted because it must continually protect the h5 pawn. The problem for Magnus now is that he cannot break through White's position with his king, as the c3 pawn and the knight on g3 prevent any further advancement. The game reached its peak excitement when Magnus, with only 20 seconds left, decided to take a significant risk by sacrificing a pawn. He pushed his pawn to b4, and when Vishy captured it, Magnus chose not to recapture with his king. Instead, Magnus recognized that if he recaptured with the king, Vishy could advance his pawn to c3, and then use his king to stay on a2 and b2, which would permanently block Black's progress. Instead, Magnus aimed to create a breakthrough with his king moving to d4, turning the game into a win-or-lose situation and limiting the chances for a draw. On the other hand, Anand played the only move available to him in the position, pawn to b5, sacrificing his b-pawn to create a very dangerous passed pawn on the a-file.
Oh, very dangerous!
Magnus then moved his king to d2, followed by centralizing his bishop on d5. At this point in the game, it would have been sufficient for Vishy to simply play knight to f1, delivering a check. When the king moved to e2, he could have returned his knight to g3 check, forcing a draw by repetition. However, due to the tight time control, Vishy misjudged the position and opted to play for a win, sacrificing his knight on f5 and creating two unstoppable passed pawns on the A and E files. The game has now reached its peak excitement. Let's take a moment to analyze the situation. Vishy has two passed pawns, and the bishop alone cannot guard both of them, so one is almost certain to promote. However, Magnus also has his own plans. He intends to push his b-pawn, capture the c-pawn, and promote his pawn in the end. It has now become a race between the two players, and with only seconds remaining on the clock, anything can happen. Anand initiated the race by moving his pawn to e6. When Magnus pushed his pawn to b4, Anand responded by pushing to e7. Magnus, however, ignored the e-pawn and chose to capture the c3 pawn, followed by advancing to c2. At this critical moment, Anand had to choose between two possible queen promotions, e8 or a8. Feel free to pause the video, take a deep think, and decide which one you would promote. Anand made the correct decision and promoted his a-pawn, with a brilliantly conceived idea in mind. Even Magnus, after realizing the idea, looked at him and smiled, creating a truly iconic moment in the history of chess. But what would have happened if he had promoted the other pawn? Magnus would simply have given a check on c3, followed by promoting his c-pawn to a queen with check, securing a completely winning position with an extra piece. Now back to the game. The brilliant idea Vishy had was that after Magnus captured the queen on a8, Vishy promoted another queen on e8. In this position, if Magnus had decided to play the logical move of promoting his pawn to a queen on c1, Vishy would have responded with the brilliant and outstanding move, queen to e3 check, sacrificing his queen. If Magnus captured the queen, the game would have ended in a draw, as the white king would have been stalemated. This was the reason the players smiled at each other 2 moves earlier. However, Vishy shouldn't have relaxed yet, as Magnus decided to play for a win even in this position by moving his bishop to e4. The game had already turned into a crazy battle between these two legends, but the magic wasn't over yet. Vishy then gave a check from d8, which Magnus blocked by moving his bishop to d3. The only drawing move for Anand at this point was queen to b6, but Anand missed it and instead played queen to d4. He believed he still controlled the queen promotion, thinking he could sacrifice the queen and stalemate his king. However, Magnus surprised Vishy and everyone else with a brilliant and magical move. Instead of promoting his c-pawn to a queen, he promoted to a knight, giving a check. It was truly brilliant chess in this endgame. Vishy seemed surprised by this move and moved his king to a3. The position was now completely lost for white, as he would not be able to prevent the promotion of the c-pawn. When Magnus played his pawn to c2, Vishy resigned, ending one of the most iconic and brilliant endgames in chess history.